When was the last time you felt like yourself? Not the version of you who's good at saying the right thing. Not the one who gets stuff done. Not the one who's got their act together on the outside, even when things are falling apart on the inside. I mean you, the real one. The version that exists when no one's watching. No performance, no filter, no mask. It's kind of a strange question, right? Because most of us think we are being ourselves. We've got personalities, routines, opinions, friend groups, all of it. So it's easy to assume, yeah, this is just who I am. But is it? Carl Jung, one of the most important voices in psychology, had a different take. He said most people, the vast, overwhelming majority, are living through something called the persona. It's a word that literally means mask. Not in a fake way, like someone pretending to be something they're not, but in a much deeper, more unsettling way. Jung believed that we all create a kind of public self, a version of ourselves designed to fit into the world, one that helps us survive, succeed, and stay accepted. And over time, that version becomes so practiced, so automatic, we forget it's not the whole picture. He warned us, the persona is a system of behavior by which we relate to the world, but it is only a mask of the collective psyche, a mask that feigns individuality. That one hits hard because it means maybe you've never actually been your full self. You've just been playing the part that worked. Alright, so what does this really mean for us today? Why should we care about a concept like the persona when there are bills to pay and emails to answer? Here's why. Because the longer you live through a mask, the harder it gets to recognize what's behind it. You lose track of your instincts, your voice, your sense of what matters. And that's where people start to feel stuck, or worse, hollow. Think about it. How many choices have you made because it's what was expected of you? How often do you act a certain way because it keeps the peace, keeps people happy, or keeps the system running smoothly? And here's the thing. That's not a flaw. That's survival. The persona isn't something you consciously built like a costume. It was shaped for you, by your parents, teachers, peers, culture, social media, all of it. It's efficient, it works, it gets approval, but it comes at a cost. When you over-identify with the persona, when you become it, you start living someone else's idea of who you should be. And that disconnect, that's where the unease creeps in. That's where people start saying things like, I don't even know what I want anymore. Everything looks good on paper, but I'm not happy. I feel like I'm just going through the motions. Sound familiar? This video is about that. We're unpacking the mask, not to shame it, not to rip it off and go live in the woods, but to understand how it formed, what it hides, and why Jung believed that breaking free from it is the only way to live a meaningful life. We'll talk about what the persona really is, how to tell when you're stuck in it, what it's covering up, this part goes deep, and how Jung's process of individuation can help you reconnect with your real self, not the one you post online, but the one you feel when everything else goes quiet. This might be one of the most important concepts Jung ever gave us, because once you see the persona clearly, you can stop mistaking the role you play for who you are. So let's start right at the core. What even is the persona? Because yeah, it sounds like some mystical psychology thing, but it's way more common than that. You deal with it every day. I do too. Everyone does. The persona, according to Carl Jung, is the mask you wear to face the outside world. Not in a sneaky or manipulative way, more like a survival tool. It's the version of you that knows how to get through life without causing too much friction. Let's make it real. You're at work, your boss is talking nonsense, and you nod along like it's all fine. You're with your family, avoiding certain topics because, well, things explode if you don't. You're on a date, and you highlight the parts of yourself that sound impressive and likable. And maybe leave the messy parts out. That's the persona doing its job. It's the social self, the version of you that knows the script, keeps things smooth, avoids awkwardness, and gets accepted. And to be honest, it's not all bad. We need some kind of persona to function in the world. If we all went around showing our unfiltered selves 24/7, society would collapse before lunch. Jung didn't say the persona was evil. He said the danger comes when you forget it's just a mask. When you start thinking the mask is you. That's when things get shaky. See, the persona starts off as a kind of helpful filter. You figure out what people expect from you, and you give it to them. You learn what behaviors get rewarded, and you repeat them. You start to notice who people want you to be. And little by little, you shape yourself to match that. And it works. For a while, because suddenly you're getting approval. You're seen as put together, or reliable, or easygoing. You're fitting in, you're staying safe. But at some point, you start realizing that the version of you people love isn't really you. That's the weird thing about the persona. The more effective it is, the more it hides what's underneath. And if you wear it long enough, even you might forget what's underneath. Let's slow that down. You can actually become a stranger to your own inner life. Like, you don't know what you really want. You don't know what you actually believe. You might even lose track of what you feel because you've spent years training yourself to feel what you're supposed to. And Jung saw this all the time. People showing up in therapy saying, "Everything in my life looks fine, but I feel completely empty." Or, "I don't know who I am anymore." Or, "I've spent my whole life becoming successful, and now I don't even care." Sound familiar? That's not depression. That's not burnout. That's not failure. That's the persona hitting its limit. And here's where it gets even trickier. The persona doesn't just show up once. It shifts depending on context. You might have a work persona that's efficient, professional, on task. A family persona that's agreeable, self-sacrificing, maybe even invisible. A social media persona that's curated, clever, always fine Harriets. And you start switching between these without even noticing, until eventually you have no idea which one's real, or if any of them are. Let's pause there because this part's important. The persona is a performance, but it's not a lie. It's just incomplete. It's the you that plays well in public, the version that smooths over your contradictions and complications so you can function. But the full version of you, the one with weird opinions, deep longings, random sadness, strange joy, buried creativity, complicated fears, that part gets shoved into the background. And that's where the trouble starts. Because when the persona takes over, when you identify only with your mask, you start living a life built on other people's expectations. You stop asking, "Do I even want this? Does this feel real to me? Am I showing up as who I am or just who they want me to be?" And that kind of disconnection. That's what Jung called a loss of soul, not in a religious sense, but in a psychological, existential way. You lose contact with what's most alive in you. So when we talk about the persona, we're not saying get rid of it. We're saying see it for what it is. A tool, a mask, a way to move through the world, but not the whole story. The work begins when you can ask yourself, where am I playing a role, and where am I telling the truth? And if that question makes you a little uncomfortable, good, that's the first crack in the mask. That's where something real starts to break through. So let's say you've started to recognize the persona. Maybe you've had a few of those moments, those wait, am I actually like this, or am I just acting like I should be moments. That's where the real tension begins. Because the persona, as we said before, isn't fake, it's just not complete. But the problem happens when it starts to push everything else out. Over time, the mask becomes the whole performance. And you don't just wear it, you become it. This is what Jung meant when he talked about over-identifying with the persona. It's when you confuse the role you've been playing with your actual identity. And yeah, it's subtle. It doesn't feel like you're pretending. It just feels like, this is who I am now. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That identity, that strong one, responsible one, fun one, nice one, whatever it is, it may have nothing to do with who you really are. It's just the version of you that was rewarded. Let's sit with that for a second. The persona is shaped by approval, by what gets smiles, what keeps things smooth, what avoids confrontation. You do it to get love, safety, success, acceptance, and it works. That's why you keep doing it. But here's the trade-off, and it's a big one. To maintain the persona, you have to suppress everything that doesn't match it. All the inconvenient emotions, all the conflicting desires, all the parts of you that feel too messy, too honest, too contradictory. You start editing yourself in real time. You hold back certain opinions because it's not worth the argument. You hide certain interests because they probably wouldn't get it. You avoid showing weakness because you're supposed to be the strong one. Sound familiar? And the longer this goes on, the more the real self gets shoved into the background. Not erased, just buried. But it doesn't stay quiet. This is where the real cost of the false self starts to show up, in all these subtle, creeping ways. You start feeling disconnected, even when you're surrounded by people, exhausted, even if you're not doing much, stuck in a loop, like life's on repeat, and you're just showing up. You might catch yourself saying things like, I should be happy, but I'm not. Everything looks fine on the outside, but inside, I don't know. I feel like a stranger to my own life. And that's not just burnout. It's not just a rough patch. That's a self-alienation issue. You've been living through the persona for so long that you don't even know what's underneath it anymore. And here's where it gets even trickier. The more successful the persona is, the harder it becomes to let go of it. Because think about it. What if the version of you that everyone loves is the one that's slowly killing your spirit? What if the job that gets you praise is draining your sense of purpose? What if the identity that makes you feel secure is the very thing blocking your growth? That's the trap. The persona can bring external rewards, but it often comes at the cost of internal peace. Jung saw this over and over again. People living well-adjusted, socially acceptable lives, and yet feeling lost, anxious, emotionally numb. They weren't dysfunctional, they were just disconnected from their own core. The false self, the persona, becomes a barrier between who you really are and the life you're actually meant to live. And it's not like you wake up one day and go, oh, I've been living a lie. No, it creeps in. You start by adjusting a little here and there, you tone things down, you play it safe, you follow the script, and then years later you realize you don't even know what your own voice sounds like anymore. That's the long-term problem with the false self. It doesn't just keep you hidden, it keeps you small. Because when you're constantly performing, constantly editing yourself to be palatable or productive or perfect, there's no space left for anything real to grow. Not creativity, not deep connection, not inner peace. All the best parts of being human, the stuff that actually matters, requires authenticity. But authenticity can't exist if you don't even know who you are underneath the performance. And that's what Jung was trying to wake people up to. He wasn't saying throw away your social self. He was saying, know when it's the mask talking and when it's you. Because once you start noticing the gap between how you show up and how you actually feel, you can start doing the work of closing that gap. And that work, that's where we're headed next. So here's the question that usually comes up next. If the persona is everything we show to the world, what happens to the stuff we don't? Like the thoughts we filter out, the feelings we avoid, the parts of us we've decided are too much. Too angry, too needy, too sensitive, too selfish. That's where Jung introduces one of his most powerful, and let's be real, kind of unsettling ideas, the shadow. Now, shadow sounds intense, dark, creepy, but that's not quite it. Jung wasn't talking about evil. He was talking about everything we push down and push away in order to keep the mask clean. The shadow is the stuff that didn't make the cut for your persona. It's not just the obviously bad stuff. Rage, envy, bitterness, shame. Though yeah, that's in there. It's also things like your desire to rest when everyone expects you to grind, your creativity that got laughed at in school, your vulnerability that didn't fit into the strong one image, your weirdness, your boldness, your voice that felt too much for the room's cess. The shadow is anything you learned wasn't safe to express, so you buried it. But here's the catch. Just because you ignore it doesn't mean it goes away. In fact, the shadow gets stronger the more you avoid it. It doesn't disappear. It just moves underground and starts running the show from the background. That's why people say things like, "I don't know why I snapped like that. That reaction wasn't even like me. Why do I keep sabotaging things I actually want?" That's the shadow acting out. Not with your permission, but with your energy. See, when you split off parts of yourself and pretend they're not there, those parts don't die. They just get louder in other ways. Passive-aggressive behavior. Sudden outbursts, depression or apathy that seems to come out of nowhere. A chronic low-level tension that never really goes away. And the more you identify with your persona, the good, polished, capable version of you, the more foreign the shadow starts to feel. You start believing, "That's not me. I don't get angry. I don't feel jealous. I'm not insecure." But the truth is, you are. We all are. The shadow is a natural part of being human. It's not a flaw, it's a function. Jung said it like this: "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." That means it takes courage to face it, because it's not fun to admit the things we've been hiding, even from ourselves. But here's the twist Jung really wanted people to understand. The shadow isn't just darkness, it holds light too. It holds all the energy, creativity, and truth we've pushed down just to stay accepted. Think about that. The parts of you you've suppressed might be exactly what you need to feel alive again, to feel real, to feel whole. But until you're willing to face your shadow, you'll keep projecting it onto other people. That's another thing Jung talked about a lot. Projection. Ever dislike someone instantly and you're not even sure why? Or feel really triggered by someone else's confidence, emotions, or freedom? That might not be about them. That might be your shadow showing up in someone else because you're not letting it show up in yourself. Example. You hate how needy someone is, but maybe you've never allowed yourself to ask for help. You get annoyed by someone's self-promotion, but maybe deep down you wish you had permission to take up space. It's uncomfortable, but it's freeing once you see it. Because now you're not just reacting blindly, you're seeing what's been buried. And that's where the split comes in. When your persona and your shadow have zero relationship, when you're over-identified with the mask and totally disconnected from what's beneath, you create an inner divide. One version of you lives on the surface, doing all the right things. The other lives in the dark, waiting to be acknowledged. And that gap, that's what leads to anxiety, emptiness, emotional outbursts, even identity confusion. The only way out is integration. And no, that doesn't mean you suddenly act on every impulse or show every hidden part of yourself to the world. It means you stop lying to yourself about what's there. You start being honest with yourself about your shadow, what it wants, what it fears, what it's trying to protect. That honesty is what creates internal peace. Because when the mask and the shadow can talk to each other, when they're not at war, something opens up. You start feeling more grounded, less reactive, more you. Jung believed that real growth doesn't happen by chasing perfection. It happens by owning all of who you are, not just the shiny parts. And yeah, it's messy, but it's also the most honest human thing you can do. All right, let's zoom out a bit, because up until now we've been talking about the persona and the shadow as things happening inside you, your mask, your hidden self, your internal split. But none of that forms in a vacuum. The truth is, and Jung saw this clearly, the world trains you to disconnect. And it does it so gradually, so consistently, that by the time you notice, it feels normal. Let's break that down. From early on, you're taught what's acceptable and what's not. And I'm not just talking about basic rules like don't hit or say thank you. I mean subtle, emotional rules. The ones that tell you, don't cry too much, don't be too loud, don't be too sensitive, don't need too much, don't make it weird. You learn to read the room before you even know what that means. You adjust, you hold back, you perform, and you're rewarded for it. Praise, approval, belonging. That's where the persona starts to harden, not just as a mask you wear occasionally, but as your operating system. And as you grow, the pressure only ramps up. School wants you to be obedient, predictable, testable. There's a right way to think, behave, sit, speak, show up. The more you conform, the smoother things go. Workplaces aren't much different. They tend to value efficiency over authenticity, politeness over honesty, and how things look over how things actually are. Be professional, be productive, be nice, be easy to manage. And then there's social media, the ultimate stage for persona building. Let's just call it what it is, a place where you're expected to perform a curated version of your life. Highlights only, flaws cropped out, filter on. And here's the kicker. It's not that anyone's forcing you to do it. It's just what everyone does. So not doing it, that feels risky, like you're breaking some invisible contract. You post what people will like. You shape your identity around the reactions you get. And little by little, you stop asking what feels true and start asking what will land well. That's where things get slippery. Because once your sense of self becomes dependent on external feedback, your inner compass starts glitching out. Instead of asking, what do I value? You start asking, what will get approval? Instead of, what do I want to share? You ask, what fits the brand? Instead of, what's real for me right now? You wonder, how will this come across? And just like that, you're managing perception instead of living a life. That's the societal machine Jung was trying to warn us about. A world that subtly and constantly encourages you to trade realness for safety, to sacrifice depth for polish, to prioritize the role over the soul. And this isn't about blaming society or tech or your job. This isn't a rant, it's just recognition. Because the more you can name the forces shaping you, the easier it is to stop letting them drive. It's like Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Well, here's part of that unconscious. A society that benefits when you fit the mold. A system that runs smoother when you're easy to predict, easy to control, easy to consume. But guess what? You're not here to fit a mold. You're not here to be efficient, impressive, or palatable. You're here to be real. So up to this point, we've talked about the mask you wear, the persona. We've talked about what gets buried underneath it, the shadow. And we've looked at how society practically trains you to keep the performance going. The big question now is, okay, what do you do with all of that? Jung had an answer, and honestly, it's one of the most important ideas he ever introduced. He called it individuation. Now, don't get thrown by the term. It sounds clinical, maybe even abstract, but it's actually pretty simple. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are. Not who you were told to be, not who you perform as, but the integrated, honest, full version of you. It's the journey of bringing all the parts of yourself, the parts you've shown, the parts you've hidden, the parts you haven't even met yet, into one connected whole. And here's the thing Jung emphasized. This isn't a one-and-done deal. It's not a goal you tick off like a to-do list. It's a lifelong process, a kind of inner unfolding that happens layer by layer, year by year. Because most of us weren't taught to live from the inside out. We were taught to adapt, to impress, to survive. And individuation, it asks you to reverse that flow. It asks you to slow down, turn inward, and start listening to the parts you've ignored for a long time. So what does that actually look like? Well, first, it looks like noticing the mask as the mask. Realizing, oh, this role I've been playing isn't the full picture. It's a part of me, but it's not the whole. Second, it means starting to make space for the shadow. Not to act on every impulse or emotion, but to acknowledge what's there. To say, yeah, I feel that, instead of stuffing it down and pretending you don't. Sometimes it'll show up as journaling. Sometimes it's a sudden awareness that you've been lying to yourself about what you want. Sometimes it's a conversation that shakes you up in the best way. And sometimes it's just sitting still long enough to hear your real voice underneath all the noise. That's not easy, by the way, because when you strip away the mask, even temporarily, there's this awkward middle zone that shows up. Like, If I'm not the polished, approved version of me, who am I? You might feel a little lost in that space. That's normal, because individuation isn't about switching to a new identity. It's about integration, weaving the parts together. Persona and shadow, light and dark, pride and shame, strength and softness. You start owning the full range of who you are without needing to hide or exaggerate any of it. And Jung believed this is where actual meaning starts to form in your life. Not fake purpose, not 5 tips to find your why, but a deep internal alignment where your thoughts, actions, and inner world stop contradicting each other. Here's something he wrote that gets right to the point. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. Let that sit for a second. Wholeness doesn't mean becoming perfect. It doesn't mean purging the parts of you that don't fit the image. It means bringing all of it to the table. That includes your doubts, your weirdness, your history, your fears, your wildness, your gentleness, everything. And here's something else that might surprise you. Jung also talked about something called your inner archetype. Think of it like your personal blueprint, the unique psychological shape of who you are underneath the roles and expectations. He believed that when you live out of alignment with that inner pattern, life starts to feel flat, disconnected, even painful. But when you start tuning into it, when your choices line up with who you really are, things begin to click. That doesn't mean life gets easy, but it does get honest. And honest living, that's what Jung considered the real definition of maturity. You stop chasing what looks good and start following what feels right. Not in a reckless way, in a grounded, awake, internally led way. So yeah, this work takes time. It's uncomfortable, sometimes it's lonely, but it's also the beginning of peace, because once you're no longer divided against yourself, you can finally start to live without pretending. You can stop outsourcing your identity to everyone else. You can stop adjusting to keep the performance going. You can build something real from the inside out. And the best part, there's no one version of authentic. There's only your version and the slow, brave work of uncovering it. And yeah, being real in a world built for performance, that takes work. It takes awareness. It takes resistance. It takes boundaries. It means being able to say, no, I don't actually want that. This version of me isn't mine. I'm not going to keep pretending just to make other people comfortable. It means getting quiet enough to hear your own voice underneath the noise. Because here's something no one tells you. Authenticity is disruptive. It messes with systems, it makes people uncomfortable, but it also wakes people up, including you. And once you start stepping out of the persona, even in small ways, the fog starts to lift. You start noticing which relationships feel one-sided, which goals don't even belong to you, which identities you've been dragging around just to keep peace. And it can be disorienting. Honestly, it can feel lonely at first. But it's also the beginning of something way more real than whatever you were pretending to be. So no, the problem isn't just personal, it's collective. You've been shaped to perform, but now you're starting to see the strings. And that's the moment you can start cutting them. Let's come back to that question from the beginning. When was the last time you felt like yourself? Not the version of you that's curated for approval. Not the one that keeps things running, but the you that just is, without needing to earn it or explain it. Because here's the thing, and Jung was loud about this, most people never even meet that version of themselves. They live as a reflection, a character in someone else's story, a reaction to what the world expects. And it's not because they're weak or fake or lazy, it's because they never got permission to be real. The mask was rewarded. The real self, ignored, misunderstood, maybe even punished. So they adjusted, they became what worked, and eventually they forgot what didn't get to come with them. But that doesn't mean the real you is gone. It just means it's waiting. Waiting for what? Not for the perfect moment. Not for some spiritual breakthrough or life crisis, just for your attention. For your willingness to look inward and stay there long enough to listen. See, most people think finding your true self is this big dramatic moment. Like you'll just wake up one day with clarity and confidence and peace. But it's quieter than that. It's subtle, it's layered. It's more like remembering than discovering. You notice when something doesn't feel aligned. You pause before slipping into the old performance. You ask yourself, is this real for me, or is this the mask again? And yeah, sometimes you'll catch yourself mid-performance. You'll see the mask snap back on, and it's frustrating. But that's progress. That awareness is the work. You're no longer on autopilot. You're awake. That's where individuation becomes real, not as a concept, but as a practice. You start closing the gap between your inner world and the version of you the world sees. Not by oversharing, not by being raw all the time, but by being honest. And once you do that, something wild happens. You start to feel at home in your own skin. You start to trust your instincts again. You stop second-guessing what feels true. That's not confidence, that's clarity. And clarity, that's rare. Because clarity can't be outsourced. It's not based on approval. It doesn't shift with trends or feedback. It's steady. It's internal. And it's yours. That's what Jung meant when he said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your parents wanted. Not who society rewarded. Not who your trauma shaped you. And becoming yourself isn't just some self-help slogan. It's resistance. It's healing. It's purpose. Because when you know who you are, really know, you move differently. You create from truth. You speak from depth. You connect from presence. And people feel that. Not everyone will love it. But the right ones, the ones who matter, they'll find you when you find you. So let this be your invitation. Pay attention to the mask. Not to hate it, but to see it. Be curious about your shadow, not to fear it, but to integrate it. And start choosing the version of you that's not just surviving, but living. The world has enough people playing roles. What it needs, what you need, is someone willing to show up real. So ask yourself, quietly, honestly, what part of me have I left behind to be accepted? And what would it look like to bring that part home? Not all at once. Not loudly. Just one choice at a time. That's how you start becoming whole. If this made you stop and think, even for a second, that maybe the version of you you've been living isn't the whole story, then yeah, you're not alone. Most people are out here performing, not because they want to, but because they were never shown another way. So if you're starting to question the mask, or if you're already peeling it off, little by little, drop a comment. I'd love to hear where you're at. What part of you have you been keeping quiet, and what are you ready to bring back? Also, if this hit something real for you, maybe share it with someone who needs the same reminder. We're all faking it a little less when we do this work together. And if you want more on shadow work, identity, meaning, or basically how to stop being a stranger to yourself, hit subscribe. I'm just getting started. Because Jung wasn't just dropping deep quotes, he was leaving us a map. And we're walking it now. See you in the next one.